All right, as we get started tonight, our study on holiness, we've talked about several different things about holiness being, I have to go back, being the endurance that it takes to live and pursue holiness, the endurance through wisdom and humility. Then we talked about the being obedient, how we have to be obedient. And we talked about how not being obedient like a teenager saying, well, I'll do it eventually, I'll do it. How we have to be obedient in real time when it comes to pursuing holiness. We have to do what God says and when God says to do it. Then last week we talked about grace in our relationships and how you can't truly be holy and live in a vacuum. You've got to interact with people in order to pursue holiness. There has to be interaction. There has to be relationships. We have to extend grace in our relationships the same way that God has extended grace to us. And so we have to do that in order to portray holiness as we pursue holiness. Well, tonight, as we get into holiness, we're going to talk about putting it into practice. Rather than just pursuing it, we're going to actually put it into practice, but not everything, but mostly in the things that we say. Because the way you talk to people comes across more. It shows what's within you. It seems like more than anything. James talks a lot about it. We're going to be in James chapter 3 for the most part tonight. But as we talk about portraying holiness and living out holiness, our words mean so much. Remember when we were kids, one of the things that I remember being told is if you can't say something good, don't say anything at all. I mean, that's something that I think that everybody has heard that phrase. It's been around for a long time. I know it's been around a lot longer than I have. If you don't have anything good to say, just don't say anything. But that seems so hard to do. It's hard for us to do that sometimes. Sometimes you think, well, if I didn't say anything except for good things, I just wouldn't be able to say anything. I just have to be quiet all the time. We think that sometimes because as we interact with people and we deal with people and we have to work around and work through people, and that's what we talked about last week, is it would be so much easier to live a godly life if we didn't have to deal with people. But how do we interact with them? How do we talk to them? What do we say to them? Has a lot to do with how our holiness is portrayed. Now, Proverbs chapter 18 verse 21 says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." See, another thing that we also heard as kids, when, I remember hearing and saying it myself, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt us. That's not true. That's not true. Yes, sticks and stones will hurt. But usually, if you get into a fight or you get into a physical altercation, you'll hurt for a little while. But you usually get over it. I remember as a kid, I got into some fights as a kid. Not a whole lot. I wasn't a big fighter, but kids will be kids, and I still remember some of the guys that I got in fights with, and next week we were friends again. We were fine. Matter of fact, a couple of them, right afterwards, we were still good friends. But and it didn't really hurt our feelings that much. Kids can do that especially. But those physical altercations, yeah, you'd come home with the cuts and scrapes or a little blood on your nose or something, but you was over it quick. But when somebody talks about you and somebody puts you down or things, it can be lasting. It can be long lasting. It'll hurt a lot longer. Sometimes it'll hurt worse and hurt longer than the physical wounds will. And matter of fact, a lot of the people that you see in this world, a lot of the people that have a lot of emotional problems, you can stem back to things that people said about them. And especially if you have someone who is emotional anyway, and then you have kids that make fun of them or talk about them, or even adults. Listen, I say kids, but it goes on for a long time. And matter of fact, if you were to go back to, if you were to do surveys of people that's left churches, you'll find a lot more people that have left churches over something that was said more than something that was done. I mean, that's just the way it is. Whether it's somebody has said something to them or about them, or somebody in their family, or even things that preachers have said or preached. But our words do hurt. Our words, but not only can they hurt, but another thing that we have to remember is words can build up. Words can be encouraging as much as anything else. So therefore, as we look at this, we have to look at what benefit can we gain. What can we gain by using our tongue? Proverbs chapter 15 says, "The tongue that heals is a tree of life, but a devious tongue breaks the spirit." See, there's a lot of different, Proverbs has a lot about the tongue, a lot about what we say. We can use it to build people up. We can use it to help people along. We can use it to encourage people. But unfortunately, and in business I've noticed this, when you have a happy customer, they hardly ever tell anybody. I mean, it's just don't happen a whole lot. They say that a happy customer might, 1 out of 100 might tell somebody about you. But if you get an unhappy customer, they'll tell everybody that they know. And you see that a lot. If you look at internet reviews, you see a lot of bad reviews because when people's unhappy, that's when they give a review. And that seems to be the same way with people's words. When you're upset with somebody or when you're mad at somebody, that's when you want to put down. That's when you want to use your words a lot more than to use them to encourage, because it's easier. It's a lot easier to put somebody down than it is to build them up. And I don't know why that is, but it rings true in life. Now, we're called as Christians to be set apart. So therefore, we're not supposed to do the easy thing. Okay? Like I said, the easy thing is to put somebody down. The easy thing is when you get angry, just spout off whatever you feel like saying. But we are not supposed to do the easy thing. I mean, let's face it, the easy thing is when somebody cuts you off in traffic, lay on the horn and cuss them. I mean, that's the easy thing to do. It seems to be, because that's what most people do. They like to lay on that horn and yell at you. And I love when they do, because I just wave back at them and smile. That's the thing I do. But we're called to be better than that. We're called as Christians to not react in that way. Now, unfortunately, as Christians, not only do the words that we say, but now we have things like Twitter and Facebook out there that you can make your words known publicly. You can tell everybody. You can tell somebody something, and everybody gets to see what you think, and everybody gets to see what you say. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, you don't see a whole lot of difference in the posts that the so-called Christians make over the posts that the non-Christians make. You don't see a lot of difference in what some of them post. Now, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them are very, very. They just don't seem to care about what they post. If they think it's funny, or if they think it's something that they thought related to something, they'll post it. And they don't care what kind of language it has in it. They don't care what kind of who it puts down. And I see it all the time. But we as Christians, we have to be a step above. And that's what it means to pursue holiness, is that we stop before we say something. And I've heard it. There's a lot of people I know that they say they're missing that filter between your brain and your mouth. A lot of people are missing that. There's supposed to be a filter there that, you before you say something, you stop and you think about, how is this going to be taken? If I say this, who's it going to hurt? How is this person going to take? Am I going to come across sarcastic? Am I going to come across hurtful? How is it going to come across? We have to look at everything when you start to say something, is it going to be helpful or is it going to be hurtful? Is it sarcastic or is it truth? Is it biblical or is it backbiting? Is it the gospel or is it gossip? There's so many ways that we can look at everything that we say. And everything that we say to or about somebody needs to be run through that kind of filter. How is it going to be taken? And we do that through wisdom. And we've talked the first night about using wisdom and humility as we go along, but we're going to get into wisdom again in another one that's just on wisdom. But tonight we're in James chapter 3, and we'll start out there in verse 1. And it says, "My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is perfect, or he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn the whole body. Look also at ships, although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder wherever the pilot desires." Now, as we look at these two, or at this, actually one more verse. "Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how a great forest a little fire kindles." As we look at this, it starts out and says that not many of us should become teachers. Now, one reason that it says that is because, number one, when you're a teacher, especially a teacher of the Bible, you're held to a higher standard by God. I mean, He tells us that you're responsible for what you teach. And I've known people that wanted to be teachers really bad, and then they didn't study properly. They didn't qualify what they studied. They didn't qualify the commentaries that they used or whatever they were using to study. And some of the things that they taught were wrong, just flat out wrong, scripturally. And when they got called on it, they got mad about it. You know, but the thing is you are accountable to what you teach. You're accountable to what you say. And this is telling us that we as teachers receive a stricter judgment, and for that reason, a teacher has to be careful not to stumble. Now, when you really look at this is not just talking, as you get into the further on verses, you see that we all, as Christians, are held to a higher judgment. Okay, we're all responsible as teachers. You don't have to stand up here behind the pulpit to be considered a teacher or a preacher. Now, I know that there's license and ordination and all that stuff that goes along with being a preacher, but we all preach sermons. We all are responsible. We're all responsible for taking the gospel. We're all responsible to teach other people the gospel. We're all responsible for that. You don't have to be called as a preacher to do that. And therefore, it makes all of us held to a stricter judgment. That makes all of us, if you're a Christian, you're held to a stricter judgment. Not only by God, but you're also by all of humanity, all people. You know, you'll be, they'll be quick to call you a hypocrite if they see you fall. That's just the way it is. The whole world notices. And if you stumble, you're going to be pointed out. And especially, and I've told at ordinations before, I told a guy that was being ordained as a deacon, I told him, I said, as a Christian, you're held to a higher standard than everybody else around you. But once you become a deacon, you're held to an even higher standard. And once you become a preacher, you're held to an even higher standard. And people judge you. The whole world judges you according to the things you do. And if you mess up, everybody that knows you is going to know about it. So therefore, you have to work really hard not to stumble. Well, we as Christians have to do that as well. Now, when it's talking about this, and it says as you stumble, or try not to stumble, it shows us here. It starts to talk about the horse and the bridle, or the bit and the bridle and the horse. Now, why does it go from being the stumbling block to the horse? Here's the thing. When you have a horse, you have power. Okay? A horse is a powerful animal. They really are. People that's never rode horses, or never owned a horse, don't really understand how powerful of an animal they are. And then, you know, like with me, I just rode horses. I had some and rode them. But those who have worked horses and had plowed fields with horses and you know had wagons and things, they really understand even more than I do how powerful of an animal they are. I remember my grandfather telling me when he was just a kid, he remembered these two guys came by on the road down below their house, and this, of course, long before there was any pavement or anything, and they got their truck stuck, or their car stuck. And my grandfather, they came and woke him up in the middle of the night, and so he took his two horses down there, and hooked him to the car. He said he bent the axle on that car. It was where they hooked it up. But I mean, a horse is a powerful thing. But if you don't control it, it can do some damage. It can really hurt you if you're unable to control it. I remember not too long ago, I guess it's been a while back, but down in Jonesboro where they do the carriage rides, there was a woman who was doing the carriage rides, and they were up there. It was when the Parsons table was still open. And here's this big old horse, and I remember had feet the size of a dinner plate, this big old Belgian horse, and And she controlled that thing so great. You know, it was easy to control, as gentle as all get out. And then all of a sudden, one day she was up there around the parson's table, and there was a delivery truck, and when it let off its air brakes, the horse went crazy. And all of a sudden, she couldn't control it. She lost control of it. And it came down off that hill at the parson's table and hit two cars coming through downtown Jonesboro, came all the way down and went down through in front of the courthouse before they finally got it stopped. The thing is, it was so powerful, and it did a great work, but listen, once she lost control with that bit, once she lost the bit, then she no longer had control. Okay? That's the way, that's the stumbling right there. That's when it stumbled, when she lost control of the bit. That's the way we are in our life. We can do great things. We can do amazing. We've got great power with as a Christian. We have God's power behind us. But our tongue is like a bit, okay? If we don't learn to control it don't matter how much good you do. It don't matter how much you read your Bible. It don't matter how much you pray. It don't matter when you're talking about the way that the world perceives you. It don't matter how much good you do if you don't learn to control your tongue. If you let your tongue just run wild, you're like a wild horse running around. I saw a video the other day, and it was quite funny. There was a guy, and I think it was on Fox News or somewhere, but up on the islands in the over North Carolina, toward the Outer Banks, where they've got the wild horses, they've got warnings up all over the place. But this guy, and he was one of these guys that was running around. He was wearing a Speedo. He's about my size and wearing a Speedo. But don't shudder like that. But he decided, as one of these horses was just walking along the beach, he decides he's going to walk up and pet this horse on the rump as it walked by. And he went down pretty hard. The horse kicked him in his Speedo. And, it's a wild horse. It's a wild animal. If it's not controlled, if it's not... It does what it wants to do, okay? And that's, if we don't have control of our tongue and we just say whatever we want to say, and we just say, and we don't have that filter, then it don't matter the power that we've got behind us. It don't matter the other things that we do when it comes to the world. A ship is the same way. Now, back in those days, they were sailing ships. But they still had a rudder. And that rudder is how they steered. Now, they used their sails and things like that, but the main steerage of a ship was done by a rudder. And if you ever look at a ship, I mean, it looks like a rudder. I mean, it looks like a book back there that steers this whole big ship. I know they're bigger than that, but compared to the size of this ship, the rudders are quite small. But yet it steers and it controls how they move and where they go. And it's so amazing to me how well they do at controlling it. And you can haul all kinds of things. You can haul whatever you want with ships. You can they can move more cargo than anything else in the world. They're so powerful. But you take the rudder off of them and you lose control of them. There's videos out there of ships that people have lost control of. They come plowing through other ships. They come plowing through docks. And it's just mayhem when it happens. And we see these kind of things, and we like to watch them on YouTube. But the thing is that's the way our life is if we don't control our tongue. And then a fire. A fire is a great thing. For thousands of years, that was the main source of heat. Now we have all kinds of, but up until about 100 years ago, fire was how we heated everything. I mean, that's how you heated your house. That's how you heated, done any kind of metal work or everything was done with fire. Now we have a lot different things, but up until that, fire was it. And it done so much good, but you let it get out of its containment. You let fire get out of the fireplace, and you've got a house fire. You've got destruction. And I think that's why James is so adamant about this, and he covered this whole chapter is about our tongue, because it's so important. And most people don't realize how important what we say is, and how important not only what we say, but how we say it. For every kind of beast and bird, this is in verse 7, of reptile and creature of the sea is tamed, and has been tamed by mankind. But no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceeds blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or grapevines bear figs? Thus no spring yields both salt water and fresh water. We can tame anything. I remember going to the circuses, and I always liked going to the circuses and watching these big, powerful elephants, these wild animals that have been tamed. You have the lion tamers and the tigers and all these wild animals. Then I saw a video today, and it's this crazy man. To me, he's crazy. He steps down in this pool with an alligator or a crocodile, whatever it was. That thing was as wide as, and they feed it a lot, so I guess that's why he didn't, but its back was nearly as wide as this pulpit. And he gets down in this, its head was that long, and he pets it on the snout, and then he feeds it this bird, and then he gets some straddle of it. And it's this show that he's doing. I mean, you think even a crocodile or an alligator can be tamed. Everything. I mean, every kind of wild animal there is just pretty much has people handle them, people tame them, but we have a harder time controlling our tongue than we do 2,000-pound animals. I remember Mr. Huffine. I never did really, I didn't know him that well. He used to stop in over the store all the time. Had that Hereford bull. And I know Glenn, he drove around everywhere in that old Chevy truck. Didn't even have a tailgate on that thing.
Didn't even have a rack truck.
Yeah, and he'd just tell that bull to get in the back of that truck, and they'd get in the back of that truck. And he'd take it wherever he was going, and then he'd bring it. And that bull, he'd stop there at the store all the time and come in and leave that bull standing out there in the parking lot in the back of that truck. And crazy. But he had tamed that bull, big old bull. And but yet, so many people, we can't control our tongue. Now, and that's what's funny, or not really. It's not really funny. It's kind of sad, because he says here, the same tongue that you use to praise God, the same tongue that you come and you sing praises to God, the same tongue that you try to tell people about God, and you try to lift up God and praise God and all this, and then you turn around and you curse people. Now, when it says curse people, it's not just saying You know, it's not just talking about somebody that's cusses somebody. You know, you don't have to be cussing and using bad language to be cursing somebody. Okay, it can be as simple. It can be just telling somebody that they're stupid, or telling somebody that they don't know what they're doing, or you just put them down in any other way. That can be a way of cursing somebody. Backbiting or gossiping is cursing somebody. There's so many, being sarcastic with them, and there's so many ways that we put people down and that we use our tongue for evil that we don't even consider most of the time. We don't even think about it, and we don't consider that as being hurtful or cursing. But all of the praise and all of the things that we do good, or all the uplifting of God we do, it gets thrown out the window the moment that we use our tongue for the wrong purpose. Because people will remember that. People will notice that. And James here, I love what he says. You can't have salt water and fresh water in the same spring. Okay? You can't have salt water and spring water or fresh water in the same pool even. Because what happens? It all becomes salt water. Once you put the salt in there, it's all salt water. There's no you can't have them both. You can't have it both ways. And that's what he says. We as people, you either got your tongue is either good or it's bad. Okay? You have and if you're using it for the wrong purpose, you have a bad tongue that sometimes says something good, but overall it's serving evil. It's serving a bad purpose more. And when that happens, you are not in pursuit of holiness. You are not portraying holiness with your life or with your mind. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your heart, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure and peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Now, when we talk about the tongue, and then we get into this about being peaceful, if you're always argumentative, if you're always saying bad things or reacting with the things you say, listen, there's going to be people in our lives that it's natural. There will always be people in our lives that are going to hurt us. Okay? Our natural reaction sometimes is to retaliate. And when we do that, that does not come from God. That does not come from Him. Okay? It comes from evil. When we are not being peaceable, when we're not gentle, when we're not willing to yield, when we're showing those bad fruits, that comes from evil. It's earthly. And you can't have earthly and godly at the same time. And unfortunately, we have so many Christians in this world that are, and when I say Christians, I'm talking about people that claim to be Christians. There are a lot of people out there that claim to be Christians because they go to church. There are a lot of people that claim to be Christians because at some point they walk down the aisle, but when you look at the way they live, you see more of the evil. you see more of their reaction. You see more of the bad things they say. You see a lot more bad fruits than you do good fruits. And I still use the term Christian because they claim to be Christians, but they don't live like it. And I'm not going to say they're not Christians, but I'm going to say that the Bible tells us we'll be known by our fruits. And so I'm not going to say they're not Christians, but they don't bear the fruit of a Christian. But we have so many of them that are reactive, more than proactive. And when you're proactive, that means that you're doing good things, you're saying good things, you're living out a good Christian life, rather than just reacting to what life brings you. And when we with our words and our actions just react to what life brings us, it's not going to be Christ-like. It's not going to be something that is pleasing to God. So as a Christian, we need to be proactive in our lives. We need to try to always build people up, always praise God, be conscious of what we say, conscious of what we do. People are always going to bring bad things against you. The world, I mean, that's the nature of the world. That's why it's called worldly. Satan still holds he still reigns in the world. And he's going to hurl his darts at us. He's going to attack us on every occasion that he can. And our job as Christians is to not react the way that he wants us to react. And I've had a video at one time it just showed us as what is inside you is what's going to come out. And it was a video of like a guy that was standing in a long line, and this little old lady just accidentally stepped in front of him in the line, and he had his back turned, and and that was just his normal reaction, and then once he felt bad once he saw what she did, who she was, and then there was other scenarios that was brought out in this video where we react, and what it showed was that what we've got inside us and what we're holding inside us, when we encounter something, what's truly inside you is how you're going to react. So if you're holding a lot of evil and you've got a lot inside you, and if you're constantly not controlling your tongue, and you're constantly spouting anger, and you're constantly reacting with anger and reacting with bad words and cursing and gossip and all those things, that's what's truly inside you. That's just the way it is. And in order to control your tongue, that can only be done by replacing what's inside and restoring that relationship with God. And so many people have lost that relationship with God, and it shows in the way they react with the world, and mostly through the things they say. I'll admit it. When I was younger, I got saved as a really young boy. But when I went through high school, and then when I went into the Army, playing on high school football team, and then being in the Army, I'll admit that was one of the hardest habits to break. Was the things the way I talked. You could have never told probably that I was a Christian. Because that was what I was around, and that's what way everybody else talked around me, and that's you pick it up, and that's probably one of the hardest habits to break. But listen, it came down to the point that if I'm going to be a Christian, and I'm going to portray a Christian, and I'm going to work with these teenagers, and I'm going to try to teach them how to live a Christian life, I've got to change. And I know that those things are still going to be around me, But I've got to change the way I react. And it took a commitment to God to break those habits. Because once you get it in you, it's hard to get it out of you. And it can be with anger, it can be with cuss words, it can be with gossip. But we got to get it out of our system. We got to get it, and the only way to do it is by God's grace. And that's what it takes for that step in holiness. Does anybody have anything else?